Well, joining me now is Peter Breen, who is Vice President and Senior Counsel at Thomas More Society and representing Mark Houck and his family. Peter, excuse me. So where do things stand right now? We saw this raid go down, and it was just shocking to the nation, to a lot of people. And now he has been brought in, been before the court. Where do things stand now? What's the latest?
Well, we were in Philadelphia on Tuesday to plead not guilty for Mark, and he was there with his lovely wife, Ryan Marie. And we are fighting very, very hard to give him the best legal defense possible. So we at Thomas More Society, certainly we have experience in litigating these FACE cases, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances cases. But we have retained the best criminal defense attorney in Philadelphia, one of the finest in the nation, to ensure that Mark gets the best defense possible. You know, these charges are meritless. We won a case 3 years ago in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. So right there on a similar set of facts that should be the controlling case law. This case never should have been brought, but we're doing everything possible to get Mark, get his innocence vindicated by the court.
And do you have a sense yet in your research or investigation as to how exactly this got elevated from the local incident where, you know, like, as you said, it went through the courts there and just kind of got run through and it was done away with? How did this get elevated? Have you found anything to show why this piqued the interest of the DOJ and the feds?
Well, we faced something similar when Obama came into office. President Obama came into office. His DOJ started doing investigations of pro-lifers at abortion facilities. And so I can only presume that there was interest at Main Justice. And we learned after Mark was arrested in that outrageous and reckless raid at his home this past Friday, we learned that a senior staffer from Main Justice out of Washington, D.C. will be litigating the case. And we realized that was someone that was actually there as part of the grand jury proceedings. So this has been run out of Washington from the beginning, not out of Philadelphia. And these cases are almost always run by the local U.S. attorney. So this is something that comes from the highest levels of the Department of Justice. And certainly you couldn't have a low-level person authorize a 20-plus federal agent raid at a peaceful man's home without whether it's the attorney general himself who knew or one of his top lieutenants who approved it. Certainly this goes up to the highest levels.
Particularly when you had notified in writing, which you have presented that evidence, that you would come in, that even though you warned them they really didn't have a case, that if they did go ahead and pursue it, that you would bring your client in. You could say, I think the wording on the document was, hey, to save everyone the hassle. So they had that information and chose to ignore it. I'm very curious as to, and now we see several politicians have written in asking for answers to this. Could there be an investigation into, I mean, I know you're busy on the case itself, but looking ahead, could there be an investigation to the government's actions on this case? And are there possible consequences that people in the Biden administration and the DOJ could face for their actions here?
Well, you had seen some congressmen and senators start to send letters, but the one that really caught my attention was Senator Grassley, who was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He is a senior, very well-respected senator. He led a letter by a number, I believe it was about 10 or 11 senators, detailing the allegations against the Department of Justice. And that one, you could tell their lawyers took a very good, hard look at this situation. They interviewed some of our attorneys, asked them, hey, what happened here? And we provided evidence and our set of facts. They asked everybody they could. And when I looked at that letter, you get lots of letters be coming out of Congress. So, oh, hey, we're really doing something. This one was very precise, and it had some pointed questions for the Attorney General. So I fully expect either they're going to get the Attorney General up at some point before the next Congress is seated, or if you see a change in control of either the House or the Senate, I would fully expect them to be bringing the Attorney General up there to answer these pointed questions. I think that the Houck family deserves an apology. They deserve these charges to be dropped. I mean, really, I would love when they bring in the Attorney General to bring in the Houck family as well, so that he can personally apologize to them for what the federal government did to them and their family.
Well, yes. And I mean, the trauma just for the kids to see their dad taken away and reportedly a belly chain, and obviously having all those guns there. And just the fact that there's that many law enforcement there, it sends a signal to the kids like, oh, dad did something wrong. What did dad do? I mean, is he a bad guy? I mean, those are the sorts of things you have to be thinking to see that many people there. So the mental anguish and damage that has likely done to the Houck family is incredibly substantial. And on a related note, Peter, I wanted to ask you this question. I mean, there are good people in the FBI, a lot of agents who do great work, even in the midst of some of these controversies that we've seen lately from the FBI. Did you hear anything from Mark or his wife about how the agents were acting on site? I mean, did they say anything to them? Did any of them, appear to be maybe sort of like, hey, we shouldn't be here? Did you hear anything like that from Mark or his wife?
And I don't want to say too much out of respect for the privacy, and also but let me I can say this. The agents, the actual line agents who took Mark in were very polite to him, very cordial. The problem is when you come in with ballistic shields, helmets, and long guns pointed at you to start the day, that certainly is going to set the tone. Mark is a Christian evangelist. And so his ministry is to reach out to everybody he sees. So he was evangelizing, the agents as they were taking him downtown to be processed. And so that's just the kind of guy that he is. That's the kind of folks that his family are. I would say, as to the children, please be praying for them. They're getting counseling for the kids, and apparently, they've got 7 kids from 13 down to 2. And the older ones, they can process a little better. The younger ones, a lot tougher. And I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. I can't even imagine the trauma that they are undergoing. And so please keep them in your prayers.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this, of course, Peter, stems from this incident at Planned Parenthood. And, it doesn't pass the smell test, for my eyes, from what I've looked into so far. I mean, here you have Mark, who goes to this Planned Parenthood regularly without incident for many, many times. Now, all of a sudden, according to the DOJ, he just attacked someone. I think on their statement, their press release, it actually said because he was a volunteer at a Planned Parenthood. That doesn't stand to reason. Why would he just suddenly do that? So obviously the accounts are conflicting there, but I want to know, is there footage? Are you aware of any footage from the Planned Parenthood? Looking on Google Maps, you can see there are multiple cameras all around that building.
Well, we were given preliminary indication the U.S. attorney is going to hand us some videos, but very few. And I would imagine, I don't know if they got all the camera angles. And if they didn't, that is a point that is going to go against them, not against us. I will say this. There are going to be conflicting facts here. That's why we've retained such high-powered counsel locally to assist us. I mean, we do this all over the country, but I want a guy who knows how to speak Philly. And so we've got that in place. And what we believe the evidence is going to show is that the alleged victim was actually the aggressor. He walked well away from the entrance to the Planned Parenthood, approached Mark and his then 12-year-old son without provocation on Mark's part or his son's part, comes right up next to him and starts engaging with the son. Mark tells him to get away. An altercation ensues. Look, if there were a crime committed on that sidewalk, the Philly DA would have prosecuted. He declined to do so. They brought a private criminal complaint. It was dismissed because the alleged victim couldn't be troubled to show up for court. So that's where we are. I would say, too, we've got continuing facts and ways to support the case at defendlifetoday.com, defendlifetoday.com, because certainly this sort of thing, we're looking at it this way. If we can give the DOJ a loss here, if we can hit them back, they've hit him, they've thrown everything they can against Mark Houck, and they probably figured that Mark would just roll over, that he wouldn't get support. He wouldn't have the best criminal defense attorney in Philadelphia, backed up by our Thomas More Society legal team across the country. And so we want to make sure that they lose this high-profile case, and then the Attorney General gets hauled in front of Congress to answer for what in the world they were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, again, like in the midst of the raid, and as we're going through all those details, it's important not to lose sight of the fact that of the allegation that's actually in place is it's such a minor thing at best, and it looks like he may have not even been in the wrong at all. One other question on the accuser here in this incident, the Planned Parenthood volunteer. I'm curious. I'm not a lawyer. His name is listed in the criminal complaint in Philadelphia that he filed. Why did the DOJ not name him? Why is his name not out in the media? I mean, his complaint here and then the subsequent raising of it by the DOJ has sort of put Mark through all this, but yet the man who started it all doesn't seem to have to suffer any consequences of having his name out there.
Well, I mean, that's another level of the injustice. The guy who was actually the aggressor is being treated with kid gloves. And, look, that is something that, we would imagine the jury is going to be interested to hear. But that's something that we'll be dealing with down the road. Certainly the media is free to report whatever facts it sees about it. Right here, what happens? The victim gets the victim is actually the aggressor. And the guy who really was put upon, whose 12-year-old son was harassed, he's the one that's being hauled off. And not just hauled off, but hauled off in a reckless and dangerous way. I mean, for heaven's sakes, what if one of the 6-year-old had run out with an air gun when you've got 20 federal agents pointed with weapons at the house? I mean, that put the Houck family in extreme and unreasonable danger. And frankly, it put the agents in unreasonable danger because we were going to bring Mark in. We would have done it. And so this whole business, it demands answers from the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. And really, it demands that these charges be dropped.
Yeah, it is truly remarkable and chilling, to be honest, to think that any one of us just going out and exercising our First Amendment right to free speech, regardless of any minor altercation in the midst of that, to have this level of a response be a potential response that you could face. And I think, what is it? He's facing up to 11 years in prison potentially. I mean, I would be shocked if that actually came through, given all the evidence we've seen so far. But just the fact that he's facing that should send a chill throughout most Americans' bones.
The entire purpose of the way this prosecution's been pursued, the raid, the overcharging, all of it is meant to intimidate. It's meant to intimidate pro-life Americans from going out and exercising their rights. It's meant to intimidate people of faith. Say, don't you evangelize? You stay on the side. And frankly, too, look, we're right in the middle of a hot election. I think it's there maybe to drive a narrative that somehow people of faith and pro-life Americans who are dedicated to peace and life, that somehow we're the violent ones. And that's outrageous. So we are pushing back. That is part of why we're pushing back so hard. That's why we set up the defendlifetoday.com website. And that's why we are taking this extremely seriously so that no one else has to suffer the way that the Houck family have suffered.
All right, Peter Breen, Vice President, Senior Counsel, Thomas More Society. Appreciate your time here today and your work on this case. Thank you.
Thank you.